Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. It's me, Dave Wakeman, your host. My guest today is returning, Sean Kelly from Vatic, and we have a case study that he worked on during the pandemic about pricing on streaming events. And the dynamic pricing information and the findings from the case study are fairly interesting. And I think that you will be surprised that they go a little bit differently than most of us probably think. And we get into a bunch of other stuff. Before I talk about that, how's everybody holding up? If you need someone to talk to during this pandemic, make sure you email me. Don't go through this thing all by yourself. Hit me up. It's dave@davewakeman.com. I'm happy to email with you, chat on the phone or over the video thing. I think we're probably overdone with video, but I'll do a video if you need. Just make sure if you need somebody to talk to, don't go through this alone. All right? Hit me up. Make sure you check out my friends at Booking Protect as your organization works to recover from the pandemic, to relaunch and reinvent itself after what's been almost a year of shutdowns and reopenings and reclosings and struggles. Check them out at bookingprotect.com. Refund protection could be a very valuable tool in helping give your customers peace of mind, giving them a little bit more certainty with their purchase. So check them out, bookingprotect.com. Also, check out my friends at the We Will Recover project. That's wewillrecover.live, where there's ideas from all over the world on helping you recover, relaunch, and reinvent your business as well. Stuff from me, stuff from Andrew and Carol at the Ticketing Professionals Conference in the UK, Angela and Joe from the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Australia, Audience View, Stay 22, Booking Protect, all kinds of folks. So check it out, wewillrecover.live. If you are listening to this here podcast, I would assume that you might like my newsletter. It is called Talking Tickets. It comes out on every Friday. I'm even going to do one on Christmas and New Year's because I'm dedicated to the cause. Also, just because it's having something to do every week helps keep me focused on learning and keeps me focused on understanding what's going on. But it's 5 stories. I'm talking about really putting a focus on how you can recover, how you can rethink your business, how you can generate revenue, how you can do all these things that are going to be necessary coming out of the pandemic. You can get that for free at talkingtickets.substack.com. That's talkingtickets.substack.com. Or you can send me an email. It's dave@davewakeman.com and ask me to add you to the list, and I'll be happy to do it. There is a bunch of cool stuff that I'm working on to put in there to teach lessons. This week I'm running a special survey to help people understand what NPS score is and how they can use it and how it works. Strangely enough, my NPS score right now from the data I've got back is over 60, which anything over 50 is fantastic. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's great. But make sure you check that out. I also do another one for strategy and marketers that comes out on Sundays. It's called The Business of Value, and you can get that at businessofvalue.substack.com. The same way I'm focusing on recovery, renewal, and reinvention and talking tickets, I'm doing the same thing in the Business of Value. I know that entrepreneurship, I think, is going to take a turn up next year, looking at the data, understanding how to create a strategy, market, and sell yourself is going to be a valuable skill. It was always a valuable skill. It's just going to take on a new level of necessity. So check it out. I'll be there. Now back to Sean Kelly. So Sean's been on the podcast before. It was a lot of fun. We talked about dynamic pricing. Sean emailed me and he said, Dave, I've got this case study with an organization I worked with who we were trying to see what's the proper pricing for streaming events during the pandemic, and can we figure out from doing a case study and studying the impact of dynamic pricing on pricing and revenue right now. And it was really interesting because I think a lot of people have been going, so I had this back and forth on Twitter. Let me back it up. I had a back and forth on Twitter, and I said, hey, most of the time pricing decisions are made by licking your finger and sticking it in the air to see which way the wind blows. That's sort of the history of pricing. Most of the time pricing is difficult and not done very sophisticated. in a very sophisticated manner. So dynamic pricing is appealing to me, and there's a bunch of pricing models that I've been learning about that, try to add a little bit more consumer research, a little bit of understanding into what constitutes a good price or a bad price for folks. So Sean came to me and he said, my guess was that people were pricing with no data and no information. They were just making a guess. And this was really interesting because Sean was right. The pricing was sort of done haphazardly, and it wasn't done necessarily with a lot of thought put into it. There wasn't a lot of data, to be fair, but there was a lot that you can learn. And I think the knowledge and the experience that Sean and Vatic and their partners have had dynamically pricing streaming events in the pandemic is something that you also could probably use to price dynamically going forward, or at least to think differently about what the pricing will be. One thing I've been trying to highlight to people throughout this is that a lot of it, the customer research that we're doing right now may not necessarily hold up when we're able to start having events and putting events on sale right now. And we don't know exactly how long that's going to be, and that could change some of the information we're getting back. So this is a great conversation. We talk about the dynamic pricing. We talk about audience development. We talk about innovation. We talk about marketing. We talk about market orientation. We talk about getting the customer's voice inside the organization. We talk about a lot. This is a really good conversation. It's really relevant because it's really fresh and it reflects specifically issues that we're all dealing with right now. So here's my conversation with Sean Kelly from Vatic on the Business of Fun. I want to welcome a very highly anticipated guest to the Business of Fun podcast back. Sean Kelly from Vatic. What's happening, man?
Hey, I am hanging out here in my little house and trying to do the Lord's work as it goes.
You and me both. I know because we talked for a while before this thing, so I know exactly. You're like me, hiding out deep. But it's cool to talk to you because we actually have something to that may be helpful and useful to people to talk about. And one of the challenges of doing the podcast lately has been giving people advice and ideas and conversations that aren't just like filling their ear holes with nothing but bogus BS. And that's streaming prices. Is that right? Or am I making stuff up? Am I making a promise I can't keep?
Nope, that is absolutely what we're going to talk about. Vatic just completed a in-depth study of pricing for streaming content. And we were really surprised with the results. And we want to get that information out to folks because it can help them with their decision making as we see lockdown continue, quarantining continue, and they more and more, I think, are having to look at how do we deliver our content, and then what, if we're not going to make it for free, which some organizations are choosing to do because they have major donors to do that, if they're going to charge for it, then what should we be charging? And there's a lot of opinions out there about what folks should be charging, but there's not a lot of great data.
Oh, but you have data, and that's going to be awesome. So let me ask you this. I'm going to start out with a very not at all provocative question to get this started because I disappoint people. I give them exactly what they want. So my guess is that if somebody's charging for a streaming thing, they can't charge more than $10. Or actually, I take that back. Netflix raised their price to $13 a month. I can't charge more than $13. I'm right, yes?
Wow, my blood pressure just went through the roof. So there are a number of folks in the arts and culture sector who are saying things like that. And from logically, I can understand why they would say that. But here's the problem, and I'm going to give you an analogy to help explain it, right? Netflix is very large, right? It is built for the masses. And it is a $6.5 billion a year organization. All of the folks who would listen to this podcast, even at the largest of organizations, would still be considered quite small in comparison to Netflix. So here's the analogy. Let's say you had a restaurant and folks said, well, you can't charge more than $10 because McDonald's charges about $10 for dinner. But, McDonald's is built for the masses. It is very large. It's working at scale. But all of the organizations we talk to, they're small and they're artisanal and they're local. They are much more like a farm-to-table restaurant, and it's not appropriate to charge $10 for that. Your patrons will expect to pay more for that very specialized product that they can get from you that they can't get from McDonald's. And this is the hardest thing, is to help folks understand what you are delivering does not exist currently out in the broad world, other than for the occasional simulcast of Hamilton. And I think there's one of The Prom that's coming. There's a movie of The Prom. Other than that, theater and orchestra and opera have been very constrained. And that's your opportunity right there.
Well, okay, so you brought up the word opportunity, and you brought up, you described theater as a farm-to-table restaurant as compared to McDonald's. So these are all things that we've never had the opportunity to work on to the podcast before. So so much winning has already happened right away. But what you did bring up that I want to point to is this idea of value. And I think what the starting point for this thing, it's very important to begin with value, because value is what people receive on the other side, right? And one of the challenges in the pricing model before the pandemic, so forget what we're dealing with now in the streaming idea, is that you can't look at the value that your customer receives through your eyes. You said you wouldn't steal my line, so I'm going to use my line right now. You are not your customer. And what you're telling me right now is that continues to be an important aspect of pricing and offering value to your patrons, because people are still looking for experiences that are built around the arts, built around opera. It's outside of the scope of most of your work, but like sports and other forms of entertainment. And the value that they're putting on it is different than the value maybe you think that they're putting onto it. And is that right?
That's 100% right. And the challenge here is that pricing in the best of times is a polarizing topic, right? You've got folks on one end of the spectrum who say, well, the arts should just be free. And then, you've got Broadway producers, who absolutely will charge as much as they can. And, what I want folks to do is to think about someplace in the middle there where they're not putting their own ideas in front of what their patrons are telling them. And that's where this data set that we have from this study is so important, is because we actually have data to help folks really question the notion of, I can't charge more than $10 or it should be free, because these are actual patrons making actual purchases over a significant length of time. And I use, one of my favorite lines is, every time a patron buys a ticket from you, they're having a conversation with you. And, in traditional marketing, we think, oh, well, the patron bought a ticket, and so our job is done. Let's go have a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. But in reality, that conversation that they're having with you is so important, because that helps you understand what's actually going on and how you can set pricing strategy for the future. And because streaming and online content is such a big black hole for most of our organizations, it's just an unknown. Having that data, looking at it, is so crucial for their success.
And the study you did, right, was over, 90 days, and it covered about, 125, 130 performances? So it's not like a small sample size. It's a pretty robust sample.
It is a very robust sample, and we purposefully set the test to be a longer period of time so that we could get 134 events into it, because we wanted to make sure that we got events of all different sizes. So we had some that had very low demand, and we had some that had really outsized demand. And we looked at a bunch of different pricing strategies because, again, we know that for all of these arts organizations or culture or sports, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. They're not going to just be able to say, well, we're charging $10 for everything. Now, they might say that. We think that's the wrong answer for them. But we think that ultimately they're going to end up setting a bunch of different pricing strategies depending on what the content is. There's going to be some free stuff. Probably the same stuff that was free before ought to be free now. Don't think suddenly folks are going to pay if they weren't paying before. And then there's going to be some pay what you will. It's still basically free, but you might get something for it. And then there might be some stuff that has a set price that's low because you want as many people as possible to attend. And then you might have some stuff that has a set price that's high because you're anticipating significant demand for it. And then lastly, you're going to have some stuff that ought to be dynamically priced because you're not exactly going to know how things are going to hash out, and you're going to want to be able to flex that pricing given what your demand, or what we like to talk about, is the rate of purchase, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, you bring up something interesting, right? Which is you're talking about there's all these different things you're measuring for, right? And I know that you're testing price elasticity. And you talk about pay what you will, or some low prices, some high prices, some dynamic things. My question is if I have always priced my tickets dynamically, or I'm comfortable with dynamic pricing, right? Or I'm just comfortable. I'm having a more sophisticated pricing conversation, which, from what I know and what I've observed and what I've seen, is like most of the conversations around pricing aren't that sophisticated, because most of the time it's like this, and nobody can see me lick my finger and stick it in the air. But it's most of the time that's the pricing strategy session. Are you doing it based on capacity because you talked about high demand, or are you doing it based on something else?
So most folks, when they think of dynamic pricing, especially in the arts and sports, right, they think of dynamic pricing as capacity targets. And Vatic has been banging its pot for a couple of years now, trying to get across the message that capacity targets aren't doing for you what you think they are. And in an online, they are virtually useless, because either you might be doing a kind of very boutique style Zoom performance, or you might be doing a performance or an event that has literally limitless capacity. In both of those scenarios, having a capacity target isn't going to do you any good. But what will do you good is if you're looking at that rate of purchase, that rate of sale, and comparing it to what you've seen thus far, because then you can see when you're overperforming or underperforming, and you can make an adjustment to it.
And so what was the most surprising thing that you found as far as price elasticity in the study that you did? Like, well, give me something that will blow people's socks off, because I know you have the data.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you, before I give you the blow your socks off number, I'm going to give you the number that we were kind of expecting, right?
Okay.
So one of the things that we like to look at Vatic is we like to look at revenue per performance, or revenue per event. And we like to average that out across a lot of events, because that gives us a pretty good standard, right? That we can say, well, this is what things look like normally, right? And when we looked at that issue, we had seen that when they went from in-person events to online events, that revenue per event dropped by more than half. And that makes sense, right? They're doing online stuff, right? Their pricing strategies changed dramatically. They were doing a lot of pay what you will. And so then when we went into the test, we're looking at that same number, right? We're looking at that revenue per event, and we're trying to say, well, did we see improvement? And we saw 10% improvement. That's extraordinary. That's double-digit growth, right, within a 90-day period of time. And that's real growth. That's not made up, because there's so many events, so many different pricing strategies that are happening, but you're able to see that growth. That's what Vatic is always looking for. We're always looking for not just, could you charge more money, but ultimately, did you make more money?
And with this, the 10% growth, right? And I'm hesitant to ask in the before times, because I know that most of this stuff it doesn't work anymore, right? Like the data that we have for pricing and anything before the pandemic started is probably close to not very valuable right now. But how much of that plays into different pricing tiers? Because I think one of the things about not having sophisticated pricing strategies in most cases is that you chunk the prices to, like the how they're stratified can be kind of clunky, and it I think it leaves people revenue on the table. But I may be wrong. Does that make sense the way I asked it? Because it's a kind of a complex question, I think.
It is a complex question, and there is, again, no simple answer. What we were able to do, because they had already been working in a streaming environment for months, so we were able to not just look at, how were things going before COVID, but we were also able to look at, how were things going during COVID before we started working with them. And so that's where average ticket can be really helpful in this scenario, right? So pre-COVID, in person, average ticket was about $21. And that had been a very stable average ticket for them for 3 years. So, that's a really reliable number. That's about what that organization does per ticket for an in-person event. Now, after it, though, it dropped to $4.59.
Okay.
And this exactly gets to your point about what are you charging for different types of events? And what they had done is they had made a majority of their events pay what you will. And only 1 out of every 4 people who was getting a ticket was actually paying anything. And so when you average that out, that's how you end up with $4.59. Now,
so that meant the average person that was spending money was not really spending much less than they would normally spend.
Well, that's part of what we're going to see later on. I'm not going to let you get me to talk about that just yet. But what you definitely saw is that when you have a pay-what-you-will environment, there's going to be about 3/4 of the people who are literally not going to pay you anything. Does that mean that it had no value for them? Not necessarily. But if you and I were offered free iPhones, we might actually take a free iPhone. That doesn't mean the iPhone, right? My last iPhone cost me like $700. So, there's a big gap there between what people will actually pay versus if you give them an option where they're paying almost nothing or nothing, will they do that? Yes, they will.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's I don't even know if it's a conscious decision either. They just sort of I want to see this. I want to do this. I would happily pay, throw out a random number, $4.59. If that was what it was. I still value it because I'm giving it my attention, and I probably even value it more if I pay for it. So, it really makes sense. It's just I'm sure that you're going to explain it to me in a little bit more depth. It's just recognizing what people value again. It goes back to that question of you have to look at what you're doing through the eyes of the customer and see what the value they're achieving from being a part of your experiences.
Well, and in an environment where it's not like you have in-person options, like the only thing you have are electronic options. Folks have, hundreds of channels on their TV, and yet the predominant refrain you hear from them is there's nothing to watch. And that's because so much of that material has become commodified. It's just getting churned out, But what these folks are doing is very special, They're literally the only ones who can do it. But they don't see it, right? They can't see it because they haven't experienced this type of environment before.
Well, so this commodification thing, it obviously hits me because that's like one of my big rants that I'll go on is like, stop treating yourself like a commodity. It is very special, and it goes back to the challenge that you had to overcome. I'm guessing here is like you had to spend that time going, this is new for everybody in a lot of cases. Any assumptions we have are probably wrong. You can't look at this from your point of view because you think that like the only way to experience this is in person because that's your bias because you work here. You have to.
And it's because it's the only thing you've ever done before.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have to follow the customer, right? So how do you help people see that? Like, what do you do to like help people get there? Because this is a new thing that like I feel is super, super important that I have not necessarily labeled as such before, but and it's not my idea. It's everybody's idea of being market oriented and letting, looking at the business from the outside in as opposed to like from my point of view, which is another way of saying you're not your market. How do you help guide that conversation so you can get them to go, hey, look, we don't know what the value is for the customer because this is new for all of us. So let's not bias this by making assumptions that probably aren't right.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have this conversation a lot when I was the head of marketing for arts organizations, and I used to say to my staff, our job in this organization is to be the voice of the customer. We are literally here to help explain to the organization, this is what patrons think. And there are other people in the organization who are here to tell us, this is what artists think, and this is what donors think, and this is what the board thinks. And all of those voices are important. But our job is to reflect back the customer's voice. And pricing is part of that voice. Mm-hmm. And so when I started having conversations with the organization we did the study with, I wanted them to understand that they were already undervaluing a significant portion of their product and that they had to be willing to take some risks because they needed the data. I said, listen, it may turn out that you were right, that actually pay what you will is the way to go, and that you're making as much money as you can make in an online environment. And if that is the case, I will tell you that. There have absolutely been times where Vatic has worked with an organization and we have come back to them and we have said, we may not be the right choice for you because what's going on for you is you're working on a different thing here than what we can help you with. And that's usually related to size, right? Very small organizations, they just don't have enough demand to generate significant improvement in revenue. And so, we told the organization, we said, listen, you're going to choose which performances have set prices and which performances are dynamically priced and which performances are pay what you will. And you're going to choose all of those starting prices. And then we're going to look at all of that because we want to look at all of this holistically. We want to be able to report back to you, given the choices you've made, here's what the result is from all of that work. And, they took some things that absolutely normally they would have done pay what you will. And instead, the starting price was $5. Because I said, listen, you got to have some stuff at the lower end because that's part of the mix of product that you had. So we get to the end of the test and we look back at all of those performances, all of those different pricing strategies, and we see this extraordinary 54% improvement in average ticket. So they went from $4.59 to over $7 just because they made a few different choices and they had us dynamically pricing some of those performances and didn't get any complaints during the entire test. No one called them up angry about what was happening. And that's a big change. 54% is a big change.
And, well, let me ask you too, because you said 3/4 of the people when it was you pay whatever you want, right? What was the total number of people who engaged with the art? How much of a different was that? Was there a lot more people that were participating and taking part when it was pay what you want, or did it not change at all?
It did change. The participation rate lowered a bit, but there is always going to be a trade-off between everything's free and now we're charging a bit of money. Mm-hmm. And there's also some re-education of patrons that's going to happen, right? If everything's for the most part, everything's been free, and now suddenly you're starting to charge even very low starting price points, like $5, there's going to be some re-education. But the organization was always making those trade-offs. They were making them back when they were doing in-person performances, because very few of those were pay what you will. Most of those had a set ticket price. Yeah. And some of those had a lot of people, and some of those had a smaller level of demand. All of those things are true. They're still true. What that starting price should be is absolutely the same question you would have asked yourself back when you were doing a live performance, which is, well, what do we think this is going to make? Like, you would have to set a budget for it, and you would say, okay, well, we think it's going to make $25,000, and so we think the starting price should be X, or it's going to make $50,000, and our venue only holds X number of people, so we've got to make it this price because that makes more sense. Otherwise, we're just going to sell out of tickets. Now, you don't have, for the most part, those capacity limits any longer, but you still have that essential question, which is, what do we think we're going to make off of it? What do we think the value? I mean, it's literally the value question, right? What do we think what's the value of this for the customers, the patrons who are going to be taking part in it?
Yeah. Now, I have two questions here. And the first one is, like you talked about undervaluing their products, right? And that being a conversation about, hey, look, you got to stop undervaluing your product. After you did the research and after you did understood what was going on, how much of a problem was undervaluing versus how much of a problem was overvaluing? Or is that even possible?
Well, at this point, they're not at a point where there's any overvaluing. Mm-hmm. We didn't see any overvaluing. There are absolutely times where they felt nervous, right? Because we had dynamically changed some of the prices, and so those prices were going higher than they had ever thought they could charge for a streaming environment. Now, again, during that period, we didn't see an impact on sales, but that doesn't mean the organization isn't going to feel nervous about it. Those things you have to go through. You have to have the wherewithal to just say, this is part of the learning, is that we're going to feel uncomfortable about some of these things.
Yes, right. And I will tell you, I have one statistic I will use for you today, because this is how I did my research, is on pricing decisions. If you can raise the average ticket price 1%, right, across the board, it typically will come back into about a 10 to 12% improvement in your revenue. That was a stat I found out when I was doing some studying on pricing. And so, like, small changes in the price often aren't necessarily felt by the customer, but they have huge impacts on your business. And maybe I'm wrong. You'll tell me about that in a second. But these pricing decisions are super, super important, because getting them right can be the difference between success and failure for the organization, and being more sophisticated about them is essential right now. But maybe you're not going to tell me I'm wrong, because that's like your gig. But I want to make that point, because it's like, the sticking your finger in the wind is like too common, and like this stuff is like, it works. It's like magic, but you have to just get comfortable using it. Yes,
you're not wrong. When we go back and we look at clients' data and we're looking at average ticket price, we don't actually, as as a whole, right? When we take all of the events in together, we don't necessarily see a huge impact on average ticket. We do see double-digit growth in revenue because for some of those performances, we're charging more when that's what the value is for the patron. And for some of them, maybe we're charging a little bit less because they might have been a little overpriced for that moment. But the thing that has to happen for all of that to occur is that you have to be looking at your data, you have to be comparing it to what has happened before, and maybe what has happened before looks really different, right? I'll go back to this average ticket, right? In-person events, $20.97. After COVID, right? Online, $4.59. That sounds so dissimilar to one another. And so it's very easy to say, oh, well, then we have to throw out all of the data from the in-person events. Well, no, no, please don't throw that data out because it's still important data criteria for you to understand rate. Because the rate, when we compared the rate of sales online versus the rate of sales in person, those curves didn't really change that much. Some of the cycles got shorter because they have shorter sales cycles now than they did back when they were in person. But how the customers buy, and this is one of the foundational principles that Vatic is built on, how your customers buy doesn't actually change that much year over year. It might change in individual situations, but as a whole, it's not changing that much. So you can use those behaviors from the past to help you understand how are things going to work now.
Now let me ask you this, and if you don't have a good answer for it, or if I caught you off guard with this one, you let me know, because it was just that you were talking about some of the sales cycles shifted a little bit, and what my friends at Activity Stream just did a study, and they were talking about, and what they found was like things in the near term are selling very well. Things in the distance will sell well where they're available. It's stuff in the middle where there's a lot of ambiguity that people are struggling to move right now. From the studies that you've been working on and the people you've been working with now, what are you seeing as far as like the sales cycles go? Is there like some sort of magic number, or is there some sort of guiding principle or something interesting that you've seen as far as the sales cycle now? Or has it stayed consistent with what, like you were saying, where it doesn't change that much?
Well, the behaviors don't change. The sales cycles have shortened because organizations have given shorter sales cycles, right? Like instead of and so the data you're going to get back is, well, we shortened the sales cycle, and so now we're seeing that we have more sales that happen late. Well, right, because you shorten the sales cycle.
Yeah, it gets late early.
Yeah. So, again, it gets back to confirmation bias. It's literally proving what you already believe to be true, which is now people only buy very late. Well, that's always been true for the world that we work in. The number one complaint I get from an organization is, well, the thing you have to understand about blank arts organization is that our customers always buy really late. And I literally hear that from every organization. And they think that it's specialized to them, that somehow, the patrons that live in their
precious
demographic
snowflake,
area,
Sean. I'm a precious snowflake.
Yes, are lazy. And it's not. That's just how people buy. And that hasn't really changed now in an online environment. But if you compress the sales cycle, then yes, it's going to be even more compressed.
So let me see, and I know that this is going to be a difficult one to really kind of like extrapolate over anything, because again, our data is very limited right now to about what we're really going to be able to see or make based on what's going to happen in the future times. But just in general, you're likely to see that there's a big buying boost early and a big buying boost late, and in the middle there's like no action. So what you're saying is that like the behaviors are actually absolutely the same.
They're absolutely the same. You absolutely have early buyers who buy it the day it comes out on sale.
I'm an idiot. I don't know why I didn't think of that before.
They absolutely buy it the day it comes out on sale because they're excited about whatever this is that's coming up. And then there's a period of time in the middle, whether it be weeks or months, where not much at all is going on because it doesn't feel urgent for folks. And then, right, a few weeks before the actual date of the event, you start to see sales ramp up rapidly.
Yeah, no, I don't know why. I was looking at I read the data, I looked at the thing over and over again, and I don't know. That should have just been obvious, but I guess that's why you always test your assumptions. That's why I'm a contrarian.
Because that's actually what Vatic does. We just test. We put prices into market for a client, and we say, how are your patrons responding? And then we adjust according to what the patrons tell us. The goal here for all of the organizations that are listening is to charge what you're going to charge, right? If you want to charge $5 or $10, right? If you really believe that the Netflix false narrative is actually true, then charge $10. But then follow your data and don't just charge $10. Try some other strategies out as well so that you can start to see what happens, because I'm going to finally give you the big piece of cake in this data. When we looked at average ticket, again, going to go back to in-person
Well, let's save that
performance.
because I have one more question before that.
Okay, I'm going to save it.
That way we can make it a tease and get people to go all the way to the end. You talked about re-education, right? Before we get to the big slice of pie. How hard is the re-education process? Because this is something that I studied on discounting, right? And we were joking about in a class I took that some of the stuff I wrote about discounts was included in the class, and they had no idea I was taking the class. It was great. How hard is this re-education process in your data to get, to reorient a customer? Because the data that I've had over the years was that it can take you 7 to 10 years to retrain a customer if you've been discounting heavily. And that's where this whole thing with me and discounts came from, is that you're always a discount brand. When you're talking about re-educating consumers about the way you need to price things to make things seem valuable and correct in people's eyes, what does that re-education process look like? And, how long does it take from your data?
Well, it starts very much like in your work, Dave. It starts with just getting the data, right? And being able to separate qualitative data from quantitative data. One of those is actually helpful. Lots of folks like to say, oh, well, we put out a survey and we asked people what we should charge, and they said we should charge $10. And it's right, but that's not quantitative data, that's qualitative data. If I, in fact, go out and ask people,
in that regard,
if I ask people, what should you pay? People are not going to say, I should have paid $700 for my iPhone. That's not what people do not self-report accurately.
And it's not intentional. That's a very important question or point. It's like when you ask those questions, it's a bad question, but it's not a bad question because they're trying to trick you. They just don't know. Right. Until you put it in front of them. You don't know that you're willing to pay $25 for the performance until they see that and they go, oh, I have to make that decision. It's a theoretical question until you actually have to pull out your money.
Exactly. So the first step is we got to get some good data. And then the second step is you've got to get everyone in the organization to actually accept the data. Because if they reject the data, if they say, oh, well, that doesn't line up with my personal beliefs, and therefore I think it's inaccurate, then you've got nowhere to go from there. And those are two big steps. Getting an arts organization to focus on data, very difficult. They're an arts organization. They are about gut level intuitive decisions. They're about art, right? Good art isn't based on data. Good marketing strategy and good pricing
is all about data.
It's all about data.
I don't make a guess. I never guess. I'm a properly trained marketer like you. I don't guess.
That was one of the things I learned back when I was a product manager at Starbucks. They were like, listen, Sean, it's great that you have this intuitive belief about something, but you've got to go out and you've got to prove it with data. And then the organization at that time, a $9 billion a year organization, then we have something we can build future strategy on. But we're not just going to do it on a hunch. The problem is for a lot of these smaller organizations, these arts, right, and culture organizations, they are in fact basing it on a hunch rather than on data.
And I think part of the problem is, and this is a good one, and then we can get to the slice of pie in a second, is that the conversation around what data is and isn't and how to use it effectively is so cloudy because there's so many different narratives that go around big data or qualitative and quantitative data that nobody really understands what it is or how to apply it. Because this was something we were talking about before, and I was like, to get a representative sample of your market is a very small number of people, right? Like I'm doing a presentation on Thursday, and I did a representative sample of the DC area where I live of 6 million, approximately 6 million people. It's 386 people.
There you go.
And so like it's not hard to you. You just have to recognize what it is. So from asking 350, 375 people what they want, you can figure out pricing decisions, strategy decisions, segments. You can understand all kinds of stuff. And so when you're making a hunch, you don't have to be in the dark, I think is what Sean's trying to say. And I'm trying to say it for Sean.
Well, and you said this earlier, Dave. You said, that you have a healthy ego. I have a healthy ego. We are, we believe the things that we believe because they are science-based, because they are data-based. At the same time, I think you would agree with me that both of us are 100% willing to say, I don't know what this is. Mm-hmm. And that was the attitude we came into with this case study is we said, listen, we want to test for this. And we told them, we said, it may be the case that we come out of this and it's not of benefit. We will tell you that, but we want the data set. We want to be able to see for ourselves because we knew that all of the other studies that were coming out were just reflective of, well, this is what's happening. We charge $10 and, oh, look, the average ticket came out to be $10. It's not useful. It doesn't tell you what price elasticity is. And so are we ready for the big piece of cake or pie?
Let's do it.
At this point?
So, where's my drum roll?
So again, back to in-person events, right? Average ticket, $20.97. And then there was a certain subset of these 134 events that Vatic managed the pricing for. That starting price was set by the organization, and it was spread across demand. So very low demand performances, very high demand performances, and all the stuff in between. And what we found, the average ticket for those performances, $19.83. So what does this tell us? This tells us that actually their average ticket is the same as what it used to be in person. But because they're putting too much of the content free, they're not actually able to achieve that. But people, when they are charged, they actually think it has the same value. And it gets back to this question of behaviors. The behaviors haven't changed. People still value it as much. They can't go to their beautiful building. Okay, they get that. But that doesn't mean the content has lost value.
Right. Well, and one thing I don't know how it would come up in the data, but maybe you do. And I didn't know that was going to be the number. I thought that's a really tremendous, because that's within really the margin of error. That dollar is within the margin of error. Is that right now the data that I've seen for like nonprofit organizations that I've been helping out and working with is that people in a downturn want to support the organizations they supported anyway. And so by undervaluing the ticket price, you're undervaluing your relationship with the people that love what your organization puts on. Is there anything in the data that highlights that, or is that just something, that we won't be able to test for?
Well, I think what
and if so, that's anecdotal what I'm telling you now, and you should use it because it's the gospel's truth.
I think what you are positing there is very likely the case. There are a lot of organizations that are putting out a lot of free content, and they're looking at something that are things that are called vanity metrics. And this was a topic that I was first introduced by Colleen Dillenschnauder. She is a consultant who works mostly in the culture sector, museums, aquariums, things like that. And she said, don't focus on the metrics that make you or the board feel better. And what are those metrics currently? Those metrics are how many people watched our video for free online, how many people came to our channel, how many people clicked into the website. All of those are metrics. I'm not saying they don't have value, but they are in fact vanity metrics. They make you feel better about what's going on, but they are not focused on the very number one thing that you need to be paying attention to, which is revenue, because you need to keep your doors open. You need to keep your people employed.
Right.
You need folks, you as an organization need to continue through the pandemic. And if your current strategy is, well, we're just going to take a deep breath and hang on tight and things are going to get back to normal, I'm really concerned that you're going to get back to wherever that point is that you think things should be normal, and it will not even remotely be normal.
Right. We share that concern, is that this period of turmoil is not being used as an opportunity for people to reinvent themselves because of this hope that things will go back to normal. And when they get back to normal, normal's not there. And then the pain becomes more prolonged and probably even more dangerous.
Listen, I get why people don't want to reinvent themselves right now, because what they do is very special, right? Their theaters, their operas, their orchestras, those are really specialized things that literally take decades to create a vibrant, sustainable, nonprofit model for. And I get that they don't want to try and figure out something else, and that everything has been based on in-person performances. I understand that. I've got 2 degrees in theater. Like, I'm super overeducated on the topic. I get it. But right now we're talking about a fundamental change in society in the U.S. And we have been in lockdown too long at this point not for it to have significant impact on the future. Maybe if it had only gone on 3 months, we might have been able to kind of, have a dip and snap back. But there's not going to be a snap back. And that's not my opinion. That's what economists say.
And that's also the history of pandemics, right? You don't listen to me, don't listen to Sean, don't listen to the economists. Look at the history of these things. And the longer they go on, the more severe the overcoming it is, and how much more radical the changes in society are. You can't recognize them yet. No, I don't have any idea what's going to be different because you're in the middle of it, right? You're still so close to it. But I can guarantee you that things are going to have changed in a way that we won't recognize until the pandemic is over. And I don't know what that is, because nobody does.
Right. We all have stories of grandparents or great-grandparents who, saved all the rubber bands in a drawer because they grew up during the Depression era, and it fundamentally changed how they look at the world, how they look at waste, how they look at recycling, how they look at thrift. And that is what's going to happen for the population at large. They're going to look at these things differently. We don't know what that result is going to be. I do know, I can absolutely say this for a fact, they're not going to stop loving the arts. They're not going to want to stop participating in the arts. But that participation is going to have some changes. And we have to start the process of making sure that we're accommodating that future.
Right. And I'll put it like this, like before times, which is like now my joke, when I talk about this, in November of 2019, a simpler time, Angela Higgins and Joe Michelle asked me to come give the opening talk at their conference they started. The first ever voice they were going to hear was going to be mine, which is still frightening to me later, but they wanted me to talk about change. And the way I talked about change now, or then, seems really like revolutionary now, because I kind of nailed this point in time, and I didn't know it at the moment, because who knew? And I said, look, it doesn't take courage to change, because change is coming no matter what happens, right? The world is always changing, and I had some stats like, in the 60 minutes that I'm going to be on stage talking to you, all these stats, like this many people are going to die, Donald Trump's going to say this many stupid things, all these, like, cracked a couple jokes, whatever. But it's more true now than ever, right? Change is coming no matter what. The challenge for everybody who's listening to us talk right now is to embrace what change is going to look like, and to use the change that's coming no matter what to strengthen your organization and strengthen what you do, so that, like, whatever the future looks like, you're able to deal with it and take advantage of it. Because things are going to be different, because they were always going to be different. The pandemic doesn't change that. The pandemic just makes it different than it was going to be before. And your job, no matter what organization it is to always be flexible and adaptable. And I think a lot of organizations have struggled with that, and they continue to struggle with that. And that's going to be the most dangerous thing, is if you become static and sclerotic, right? You have to be nimble. You have to be flexible. You have to understand that, like, it doesn't matter if people want to experience art differently. They still want to experience art, and that's an amazing opportunity for me, right? It doesn't matter if people want to experience sports differently. They still want to experience sports. How do I do that, right? And that becomes back to that market orientation thing that we've been talking about throughout the day, which is seeing what we do through the eyes of our customer. And the way you so elegantly put it is bringing the voice of the customer inside the organization, because that's the job of marketing. And that's the pricing conversation is so important, and it's so valuable, and it's so it is a conversation, because people tell you stuff if you're willing to listen.
Exactly, and those conversations are in your data, right? That's why we want people to test and test and test, because that's how they learn more. They say, okay, well, we've only ever charged $10 before. Now we're going to charge $15 for this thing because we think it's going to be really exciting, or $30 or $45. I mean, there are arts organizations right now that are doing online streaming and charging $95 for a ticket for the household, and they're selling out. So there is a lot more variance out there. We saw variance in our study. To go from $459 to $1983 for performances that are being dynamically priced, that is a 4x gap in price elasticity. We never see that at Vatic. We never see that type of price elasticity. But it really gets back to this, how much of a black hole we're in right now, how much is happening. It's not that stuff doesn't happen inside of a black hole, but we can't see it. Yeah. Because it's a black hole.
Yeah. That's exactly right. We have, and again, this idea of market orientation and being connected to your market, it's important no matter when. It's more important now because any assumption you're making is wrong. I can say that with absolute certainty, because we just don't have any idea what people are really doing or thinking or feeling. Because even if people are talking to you and telling you things or engaging with you, they're probably not being 100% honest, or they're not 100% certain how to react or what to feel right now. So any guesses and assumptions are basically useless most of the time. They're absolutely dangerous right now, and you have to use the data. You have to be guided by what people do, not what they say, or not what you feel. Right? There's room for your gut, but especially not
what
now.
You feel, because the biggest hindrance is those things that cause us to go into fight or flight. That's literally what this entire pandemic crisis is an example of fight or flight. Yeah. And it can cause an organization to go into a mode where they literally flee from their customers, right? If they're not producing something right now because they think that their art form is tied to a building. You are a theater. You are an opera company. You are a performing arts center. You are not a building. You don't have to actually have a building to produce art. Right. You could have done your work, and some organizations do, in a parking lot.
I was just going to use the parking lot. In Rhode Island, they put on a performance in a parking lot. It was amazing.
Right. You don't have to have the building, and you know you don't.
But you're afraid not to have the building. It's an excuse not to take action.
You're afraid, and your board is afraid, and your artists are afraid. I get all of that. But the reality is, if you were a major arts organization and your building burned down, you would not stop being a major arts organization. You would immediately start reaching out and start trying to find other venues that you could put on your art in. This isn't any different. It's not about finding a brick and mortar venue. It's about finding an electronic venue.
And reframe it this way, right? Think about all the people who have never had the opportunity to experience the art that you produce, who can now experience it because you're not just in the building.
There was one organization that produced some statistics on their online streaming. This isn't from our study, this is from somebody else. And they said that 75% of their online buyers were new to file, had literally never purchased a ticket. 75%. It is an extraordinary, extraordinary number, and really speaks to your point about how any efforts you make right now actually only pay dividends later, because you get to hold on to all of those people who've experienced you for the first time.
I'm an OG in this thing about using these tools and technologies to expand your market, because I see it done so well in certain places. Like I've been a longtime fan of what the Melbourne Red Devils in the Australian Football League do with their membership program, right? Think about it like this. If they can do it, an arts organization can do it, right? Just think about different ways that you can create value for people now. And I bet you the answer is surprising, right? I mean, I don't bet you. I know. I bet my entire reputation that if we sat down with a virtual whiteboard and we could come up with ways that you can deliver new value to people that you have never done before within an hour. Any organization in the world, we'll do it for free just to prove the point.
We would absolutely do it for free. Please invite me to whoever calls you up to do that.
The first 3 people that are listening to this, Sean and I will do a free virtual whiteboard workship with you and your organization to come up with places.
We absolutely will.
It's the pandemic and Christmas time, baby.
Because the organizations that are being successful right now, a lot of them are having to take a very significant sidestep to what their art normally looks like. Mm-hmm. And that's very hard for artists to say, our art normally looks like this, and now, because this is the venue we have this electronic venue, now our art needs to look like that. Will it look like that forever? No, it's okay not to be right. It's okay not to make the right choice. Mm-hmm. But you want to be able to learn from it so you can make a better choice the next time.
Right. It's not okay not to try, is how I would put it. It's okay to be wrong. It's not okay to give up. That's the Stockdale paradox from good to great, which is that we know this is going to end, we know it's going to suck, but that doesn't give you the permission to quit. You have to keep going, and that's what I would tell everybody. Sean, where can people find you? Because now we've been going for 2 hours, even though this podcast is only 56 minutes. We've been going for the whole afternoon here.
Hey, if you want to avail yourself of this free whiteboard opportunity, or you just want to talk to me, you know what? Send me an email, seank@vatic.tech. That's SEANK @VATIC.TECH. Send me an email. I'd love to chat with you. I like just talking about this stuff, and I have real empathy for the constraints that organizations are in right now.
Yeah. Oh no. That's why I make the offer, and I put you on the spot by making the offer with you. But it's
you didn't actually talk about that before the podcast.
No, we didn't. But I want to see people come out of this as safely and securely as possible. And don't waste a good crisis, right? It's use this as an opportunity to take some risks and take some chances. And the stuff that you work on is great, right? It's there's 2 really, really good dynamic pricing people, and you're at the top of my list of people that I go to on this stuff. So it's fascinating. The pricing is such an incredible lever to for your organization. So if you're not really like thinking through in a sophisticated manner pricing, you really should, because it's like it can be a missed opportunity, because you can really like make bad assumptions, and the data really turns up pretty quickly, and it's usually very surprising, as the case today when you pretty much almost got the same money for virtual tickets as you would get for in-person events. And that's like really, really awesome, because I bet nobody else would think that could happen.
I didn't think it could happen. I never thought in a million years we would see that result. And we had purposefully put performances into the mix of what we were managing to try and guard against, well, they only gave us blockbusters. So of course we ended up with this phenomenal result. I mean, you know, one of the events only had like 12 people who came to it. But, you know, that's what we wanted. We wanted things that had a wide variance of demand.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for doing the podcast and sharing this stuff with us. I think I learned something, so I don't know if everybody else did, but that's fine. I learned, so that's good.
It was, as always, an extraordinary pleasure. I look forward to possibly doing one of these whiteboards with an organization. I think that would be so much fun. And I hope everyone is staying safe and following social distancing and masking guidelines, because that is a very important part of how we're all going to get through this.
That's right. Everybody be safe and take care of yourselves.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me know what you thought about my conversation with Sean Kelly by sending me an email. It is my name, dave@davewakeman.com. Check out my website. It's davewakeman.com. It's been going through a little renovation over the last couple months to clean it up, make it a little more fancy, make it a little more eye-friendly, you know, all those. Make sure you connect with me on the social medias. You can find me on Twitter. I'm @DavidWakeman. Why I don't have @Dave Wakeman is a long story, but the guy hasn't tweeted since 2010. So if you can get me that Twitter handle, get it for me, please. Thank you so much. Make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to do a little bit more on the LinkedIn. Check out my newsletters. There's 2 of them. The one on Friday is called Talking Tickets. It's at talkingtickets.substack.com, and it is 5 stories from the week of tickets, focused around analysis and learning and action items to help you recover, reinvent, and reimagine your business coming out of the pandemic. On Sundays, I do a little thing called Business of Value, and that's about marketing and strategy. Again, more for the next foreseeable future about recovery, reinvention, rethinking, relaunching your business. You can get that at businessofvalue.substack.com. Make sure you check out my partners, Booking Protect, good friends of mine, www.bookingprotect.com. As you and your organization think through ways to recover from the pandemic, refund protection may be an incredibly valuable piece of the puzzle of giving people peace of mind, certainty in their purchases, and just making it a little bit easier for people to buy tickets, especially when things are still going to be uncertain for the next several months at a minimum. Check them out at bookingprotect.com. Make sure you check out my friends at ActivityStream, activitystream.com. They have put together a really great resource for people in live entertainment at the We Will Recover project, which you can find at wewillrecover.live. There's experts and people like me from all over the world. The experts, everybody else, me, I'm just me. But check it out, wewillrecover.live. There's some great stuff from the folks at Stay 22, Andrew and Carol at the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Birmingham, Joe and Angela from the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Australia, NTICS, and many, many more. Okay, so check it out, wewillrecover.live. Like I said at the start of the podcast, if you're struggling, it's the holidays, if you just are like, holy hell, what in the world is going on, send me an email. It's dave@davewakeman.com if you need to talk to somebody. We can text, we can talk, we can WhatsApp, we can do whatever, right? I just don't want you to feel like you're going through this thing alone. I want you to know that at a minimum I'm here for you. So hit me up, dave@davewakeman.com. Even if you just want to say hello. I love to get your notes. I love to hear from people. So dave@davewakeman.com. As always, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being here. Today is December 14th while I post this thing up. It's been a tough year for everybody, but hey, look, I'm glad that you're still hopefully healthy and safe, and I'm thankful for you still listening. So take it easy, and I will talk to you again soon.